Hello fellow readers, and welcome to another month of what I've read this month. I have two books that I read and I can't show you. I read Lilac Girls by Martha Kelly, and that one, it was interesting because I read it, but I've been reading so many World War II books that I think I almost lost a bit of why it was so good. So I kind of, when I finished it, I kind of pondered it for a minute, and then I went from 3 stars to 3.5, and now that I've been thinking about it more and more, I'm like, you know, that was a 4-star book. I would like to read it again one day, but we'll see how far into the future that is. I also read Mere Motherhood by Cindy Rawlings, and that one was a loaner, so I had to get that back, and that was really good. She is the one, I think, that did Morning Time or Morning Basket Time or something like that. She kind of started that movement. And I really thought when I opened the book, I think she does the Mason Jar podcast. Anyway, when I opened the book, I was assuming that it was going to be kind of like the Charlotte Mason Companion, not really how-to guide, but kind of like a how-to guide. And it was more just like having a cup of tea with another homeschooler. And it was just her journey in that, kind of how she did things at certain different areas of her life. And it was very enjoyable, to be sure. And I did like that one. The next book that I finished was Still Alice by Lisa Genova. This is part of our monthly book club reads for the local. And I love this one so much. This tells the story of a almost 50, mid-40s, late 40s, about 50, somewhere around there, woman who was basically the top of a university, very smart, I'm trying to read if she is at 50 years, okay. She's a cognitive psychology professor at Harvard and a world-renowned expert in linguistics with a successful husband and 3 grown children. And basically it's her story of Alzheimer's. And it was told beautifully. It had, it didn't have it in the first person, but it really is kind of her perspective on it. And what was really fascinating to me is watching her, she makes these notes to herself and she's starting to realize that she can't remember stuff, and so she starts being more specific, and seeing the progression, you kind of follow along in her journey to the point where she can't work anymore. It was beautiful. You got to see the family life and her relationship with her husband, and honestly it was just beautifully written. Alzheimer's is in my family, so it was just something, it was beautifully put, but it was real, but it wasn't so harsh that you're kind of afraid to step into that. So I hope that makes sense. But anyway, I really, really enjoyed this, and I look forward to reading that again someday because I really enjoyed it. Sounds funny to say that I enjoyed something like that, right? Okay. Another book I finished this month, and I finished it in like 2 days, was Caddwood. This was part of my Back to the Classics challenge book. And this is one that I chose. I don't think it was meant for this month. And to be honest, it isn't each line means each month. So I just picked up, I wanted something lighthearted, especially after March, and just something fun. And then this one won the New Mary Medal, and I've heard so many people say if you love Laura Ingalls, you're going to like Caddwood, or if you like Laura Ingalls, you're going to love Caddwood. And absolutely, this was a fantastic tale. And I know my daughter or my son has read it, or both, and we're like, you know what, let's just do it as a family read aloud. We enjoyed it so much. Another one that I read was Island of the Blue Dolphins. This was fabulous. I don't remember reading this, in my younger years. That doesn't mean I didn't. I just don't remember it. It is a female version of Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, but it is so much more intriguing. Like, her attitude and her just go-get-em mindset and survival skills that she develops off the coast of California, which is where I'm from, and born and raised, grew up, and all that fun stuff. So this definitely was just, it was neat to think of all the geology that we have and the geography that we have at our fingertips, and I never really contemplated until you put it into a wildlife perspective. Basically, there's no civilization there. So that one I really did enjoy. Probably not as much as Caddwood Lawn, but I really did enjoy it. I am more I do enjoy a good learning to work with what you have, what your resources are kind of story, and I found that one to be absolutely on par with it all. It reminded me a lot of Jean Craighead George's books. So that, if that helps. The next book that I finished, notice how I'm putting this, it was actually an audiobook, but my husband picked this up for me today because he knew how much I loved the audiobook, and that is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. What a mouthful, right? When somebody told me the premise of the story told through a series of letters from various characters, I was like, that's going to be really hard to follow. And my mom had the audiobook and she said, go listen to it. It's fantastic. And I couldn't agree more. Like, I never wanted to stop once I started the audiobook. And then my husband found this for me today, and I'm so excited. He knew how much I was just enjoying it, and he even would stop doing what he was doing for a bit and listening to it. I caught him a few times. But this one, really, it's after the World War II. Again, I'm on a World War II kick. It must be all the children, or all the children I'm surrounding with in their obsession. Or they get it from me. But she is a writer, and she ends up meeting a fellow in Guernsey who ends up with her book and wants to read more of it, and it's Charles Lamb. And so they just end up writing letters back and forth, and then she ends up going there, and there's just this blossoming story that you get to see, and it's really, really good. I enjoyed this so much, and I hear that they're coming out with the movie, and I can't wait to see it. So that was really neat. And I don't have it with me to show you, only because I don't want to get up. I just don't want to get up. This is lazy. But we finished our read aloud this month, and that was Swallows and Amazons by Arthur. I'll put it here. I don't remember. But it was phenomenal, but it was written in 1903, so it did take us a little bit longer to read just because some of the language, it just means a slowing down pace. It was phenomenal. We watched the movie, which is nothing like the book, a couple hours ago. Well, it has elements of the book, but not a lot. And I recommend that one. I am so surprised how much we loved it. So that one is definitely fun, a fun read to do. It is slow going because we were getting caught up in all of the boat terms, and it was trying to remember we were trying to figure out how they were doing certain things only because of the description involved in it. So, another book that I read was A Cup of Dust by Susie Finkbeiner. I'm going to guess it's that. This one is classified as a fiction Christian historical book. And I was very interested in it just because of the Dust Bowl. I don't know too much about it other than there was this horrible dust storm. But what I didn't understand was that it was actually it wasn't just like a few days at a time Dust Bowl. It was something that was continuing over for a long period of time due to a drought in from like Canada all the way to, it might have been Mexico. But they don't really talk a lot about that in here. That's something that I was researching because when I was finished with the book, I felt like I still didn't have a whole lot of information about it other than how much they had to clean it up after it went through and how awful it was for everybody. This is a story of I don't remember how old she is, 10-year-old girl, Pearl, and her slow-witted, how do they describe? Basically, there's brain damage to her 17-year-old sister, and she's like a child. I don't know what the politically correct term is today. I know it's not what we grew up saying, because that's been abused. But it's about those two girls, and her father's a sheriff, so he's better off than everybody else, and you just get to kind of see their family life. And it starts off really interesting, and I really enjoyed that. But then probably, I want to say a quarter or a third of the way through, another character comes into the story. And the author kind of danced along the horror lines a little bit too much for me, just because I wasn't prepared for that. And there's a backstory to this that I think you learn pretty quickly in. And this other character, you know instinctively that he's part of that backstory. But, and I did figure this thing out pretty quickly, and I don't know if that just means that she didn't try to make it so much like a mystery, or if I just have an author in mind, because one of the things that my husband hates is I'll start watching, something like Death in Paradise or Foyle's War, you know, Poirot or Miss Marple, something I've never seen before, and 5 minutes into the movie I'll point out the murder, and he's like, how did you figure that out? Nobody's been dead yet. Like, I just know it's that person. And usually I'm right. I have been wrong, but usually I'm right, and it's just, I think like an author. So I kind of knew what the story was going to be, or how it would end up, which I think helped the suspense to it. But I didn't know if the character would have crossed the line into almost being sexually icky. It almost felt like that at sometimes, but I think he's just a really nasty character. And there was never any crossing of that, and there was never any language in here that I remember. That's all I can tell you if you've never heard of this book. I think Caddwood and Island of the Blue Dolphins is pretty self-explanatory. But in the end, it was okay. I probably won't want to read it again. In the end, it wasn't what I was expecting. So, there's that. Another book that I read. This is Codename Verity, and I loved this book. It is full of language, and that told me how good of a book it was, because even though it was full of language, I wanted to keep reading. And usually at this point I was just like, oh, I'm done with this. You know, I don't like foul language. I really don't. It's easier for me to hear it than it is for me to read it. So, especially books, I just don't want to read it. But this is the story of two girls that are basically told in their own perspective. So the first girl is caught. This is a horrible cover, by the way. It's World War II, spy espionage, not what this looks like. But the first girl gets caught, and she's in the Gestapo interrogation, and basically they're finding her all this paper to basically confess. And she starts writing her story, but going back and kind of leading up to the point. And she's a very good storyteller, because the translator is angry about what is not being said. And Gestapo man is like, you're missing the point. She's told us so much and you're missing it. And then the second half is her best friend's perspective on everything. So I loved this book. It was so good. And I would like to read that one again. I hear there's a book 2, so can't wait to read that. The other one that I'm finishing up is another audiobook, because I just so here's what happened. When I started reading more, I was noticing a lot of my handcrafts were kind of getting let go, and I really wanted it. You know, I still wanted some of those crafts to happen. And so when the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, I I got to read that, I was like, you know what, I wonder what more audiobooks of some of the other things I want to read are available. And The Help is one of them. I have been wanting to... It takes editing a video to realize that your battery died or that you ran out of memory. I'm not sure which one it was. But yeah, so I got the audiobook for The Help, and I've been able to get more projects done, which is win-win in my book. And those are the books that I read for the month of April. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Book nerds out there, give me a thumbs up. And I will see you next time. But in the meantime, have another cup of coffee, read another chapter, and enjoy your books. Bye.